At 10:47 this morning, Chief Justice John Roberts delivered the Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling striking down President Trump's emergency tariffs in what legal scholars are calling the most devastating rebuke of presidential power in a generation. Two of Trump's own appointees, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, joined Roberts and the three liberal justices to declare that Trump's sweeping trade war exceeded his constitutional authority. The immediate consequence, $170 billion in tariff refunds, may now be owed to American importers, and Trump's signature economic policy lies in constitutional ruins. Subscribe to this channel immediately because what I'm about to walk you through is not just a Supreme Court ruling. This is Trump's own justices destroying the legal theory that built his presidency. This is his constitutional authority crumbling under the weight of his own appointments. And this is a $170 billion refund fight that could bankrupt his entire trade agenda. Here is what actually happened this morning, because the details reveal how completely Trump's legal foundation has collapsed. The opinion, authored by Chief Justice Roberts, dismantled Trump's use of the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act with surgical precision. Quote, "The president asserts the extraordinary power to unilaterally impose tariffs of unlimited amount, duration, and scope," Roberts wrote. EPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. The court found that Trump's declaration of a national economic emergency to justify blanket tariffs on virtually all imports was, in Roberts' words, an impermissible expansion of executive power that Congress never intended. Sources familiar with the White House reaction describe complete panic when word of the decision leaked at 9:15 a.m., 32 minutes before the official announcement. Senior staff scrambled to locate Trump, who was in the residence tweeting about unrelated matters. Economic advisor Larry Kudlow was reportedly seen running through the West Wing clutching printed copies of the opinion. One aide described the scene as biblical chaos. The vote breakdown tells the devastating story. Roberts was joined by Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Barrett, Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor in the majority. Only Justices Alito, Kavanaugh, and the newest justice sided with Trump's position. This means two of Trump's three appointees rejected his core legal argument. Barrett, in a concurring opinion, wrote that emergency powers cannot become a substitute for the legislative process simply because that process proves difficult or time-consuming. Gorsuch was even more pointed. A president's policy preferences do not constitute a national emergency. At 11:19 a.m., exactly 32 minutes after Roberts finished reading the decision summary, the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped 427 points. By 11:21, it had gained 847 points. Treasury bond yields fell sharply as investors anticipated the end of trade uncertainty. The dollar weakened against major currencies as foreign exchange markets priced in reduced American protectionism. Hit that like button right now if you understand the significance. This is not just Republicans losing a vote. This is Trump's own Supreme Court appointees rejecting the emergency powers doctrine that has defined his presidency. The algorithm decides what breaks through. You decide whether this analysis reaches people who need to understand how constitutional authority actually works. The leaked document obtained by sources reveals the scope of the financial catastrophe facing the administration. Since Trump's emergency tariffs took effect in March 2025, the federal government has collected $134 billion in additional revenue from 301,000 different American importers. These companies, ranging from small retailers to Fortune 500 manufacturers, paid the higher tariff rates under legal protest, specifically preserving their right to seek refunds if the tariffs were later ruled invalid. Penn Wharton budget model analysis suggests the total refund obligation could reach $175 billion when accounting for interest and penalties. The Treasury Department's own internal estimates, according to sources familiar with the calculations, project refund claims will exceed $170 billion within 90 days of today's decision. This represents the largest single financial obligation created by a Supreme Court ruling in American history. The legal machinery for processing these refunds does not currently exist. The Court of International Trade, which handles tariff disputes, has never confronted refund claims on this scale. Court administrators have requested emergency funding from Congress to hire additional staff and create new processing systems. Sources at the CIT describe the situation as unprecedented and potentially overwhelming. Judge Gary Katzman, Chief Judge of the Court of International Trade, held an emergency meeting at 11:45 a.m. with his administrative staff. According to sources familiar with the meeting, Katzman warned that the court's current systems could handle perhaps 2,000 refund claims efficiently. The Supreme Court decision could trigger more than 300,000 individual claims. The court's computer systems, still running on software from the 1990s, may require complete overhaul. The Department of Justice has already begun mobilizing what sources describe as the largest legal defense operation in American history. DOJ Civil Division Chief Brian Boynton was reportedly pulled from a meeting about immigration cases and told to focus exclusively on tariff refund defense. The department has reached out to major law firms to hire additional attorneys on emergency contract basis. Sources estimate the government could face legal fees exceeding $500 million just to fight the refund claims. Corporate law firms are mobilizing with equal intensity. Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher announced it has assembled a 47-attorney task force dedicated to tariff refund claims. Sullivan & Cromwell is reportedly advising Walmart, Amazon, and 3 other Fortune 100 retailers. Sources at major corporate law firms describe the potential fee structure for refund cases as the biggest litigation payday since the tobacco settlements. At 12:03 p.m., Trump's response began appearing on Truth Social. His first post: "What happened today with the 2 United States Supreme Court justices that I appointed against great opposition, Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett, whether people like it or not, never seems to happen with Democrats." He followed with, "The Supreme Court has made their decision. Now let them enforce it. We have other tools." 27 minutes later, emergency tariffs coming. America first. Republican senators began choosing sides immediately. Senator Josh Hawley posted on X within minutes. "The Supreme Court got it wrong. President Trump has inherent authority to protect American workers." But Senator Mitt Romney responded, "The Constitution matters more than any policy preference. Today, the court reminded us that no president is above the law." Senator Susan Collins issued a statement calling the decision a victory for constitutional governance. Senate Majority Leader John Thune found himself in an impossible position. Sources describe a heated phone call between Thune and Trump at 1:47 p.m., where Trump demanded that Senate Republicans publicly condemn the ruling. Thune, according to 2 people familiar with the conversation, told Trump he could not ask senators to attack the Supreme Court. Trump reportedly hung up on Thune mid-sentence. Within minutes of that call, Trump was on the phone with Senator Rick Scott, chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Sources familiar with that conversation say Trump asked Scott to primary every single Republican who doesn't defend me against these justices. Scott, who owes his committee position to Trump's support, reportedly told the president he would consider all options. The implications are staggering. Trump is threatening to primary his own party's senators for refusing to attack the Supreme Court. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, traditionally a Trump ally, issued a statement at 2:47 p.m. that created shockwaves through the party. Quote, "The Supreme Court is a co-equal branch of government. I disagree with today's decision, but I will not question the legitimacy of justices who were confirmed by this Senate." Cotton's statement represents a direct rebuke to Trump's attacks on Gorsuch and Barrett. But Senator J.D. Vance took the opposite approach. In a statement released at 3:15 p.m., Vance called the decision judicial activism at its worst and specifically criticized justices who have forgotten they serve the American people, not the Washington establishment. Sources say Vance's statement was coordinated directly with Trump's communications team. The battle lines within the Republican Party are now drawn. Democrats celebrated immediately. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer held an impromptu press conference at 2:15 p.m. Quote, "Today, the Supreme Court reminded Donald Trump that we are a nation of laws, not a nation of executive whims. American businesses deserve their money back, and American consumers deserve relief from Trump's failed trade war." House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries added, "This is what happens when constitutional guardrails actually work." International reaction was swift and coordinated. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney issued a statement within 2 hours. "We welcome today's decision as a return to the rule of law in American trade policy. Canada stands ready to rebuild the economic partnership that President Trump's tariffs damaged." European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the ruling a victory for rules-based international commerce. China's response was more measured but equally pointed. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Yi told reporters in Beijing, "We have consistently opposed unilateral trade measures that violate WTO principles. Today's decision validates our position that tariffs imposed outside proper legal frameworks harm global economic stability." Corporate America mobilized instantly. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce announced it would coordinate refund claims on behalf of member companies. President Suzanne Clark stated, American businesses paid these tariffs under protest, and we will ensure they receive every dollar they are owed. The National Association of Manufacturers projected that refunds to its members alone could exceed $45 billion. Walmart, America's largest importer, issued a statement confirming it would seek full restitution of all tariff overcharges dating to March 2025. Sources familiar with Walmart's calculations suggest the company could claim refunds exceeding $8 billion. Target, Costco, and Home Depot issued similar statements within hours. The retail sector's mobilization extends far beyond the largest players. The National Retail Federation, representing 18,000 member companies, announced it would create a unified legal strategy for smaller retailers who lack the resources to fight individual refund battles. NRF President Matthew Shea stated, "Small businesses paid these illegal tariffs just like everyone else. They deserve their money back just as much as Fortune 500 companies." Sources at major accounting firms describe a frantic effort to reconstruct tariff payment records dating back to March 2025. PwC has assigned a 200-person team to help clients calculate refund claims. KPMG sources estimate that accurate refund calculations could take months for complex importers with thousands of product categories. The accounting fees alone could exceed $2 billion industry-wide. Amazon's response was particularly significant. The company issued a statement at 4:15 p.m., confirming it would seek refunds for tariffs paid on behalf of third-party sellers using its logistics network. Amazon's potential refund claims could exceed $12 billion when accounting for both its direct imports and the millions of packages it processes for marketplace sellers. Legal experts describe Amazon's position as potentially the most complex refund case in trade law history. The automotive industry faces equally massive refund implications. Ford Motor Company paid an estimated $3.2 billion in additional tariffs on parts and materials since March 2025. General Motors' exposure could exceed $4.1 billion. Tesla, despite its domestic production focus, paid approximately $800 million in tariffs on battery components and raw materials. Sources at all three companies confirm they will pursue aggressive refund strategies. At 3:22 p.m., Trump signed what the White House described as an emergency executive order on trade protection. The order imposed a 10% tariff on all imports under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which grants the president temporary authority to impose tariffs for up to 150 days without congressional approval. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called this the president's backup plan to protect American jobs. Translation: Trump is attempting to replace his illegal tariffs with legal ones, but Section 122 requires congressional approval for extension beyond 150 days. He has bought himself 5 months to either get congressional authorization or watch his entire trade agenda expire. The legal challenges to Trump's replacement tariffs began before the ink on his executive order was dry. The Coalition for a Prosperous America filed suit in the D.C. Circuit Court at 4:45 p.m., arguing that Section 122 cannot be used to circumvent the Supreme Court's constitutional ruling. Additional lawsuits from the Chamber of Commerce and individual companies are expected within days. Legal scholars immediately questioned whether Trump's Section 122 gambit would survive judicial review. Professor Jennifer Hillman of Georgetown Law, former general counsel at the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, told reporters, using Section 122 to replace tariffs that the Supreme Court just declared unconstitutional raises serious questions about whether the president is attempting to circumvent a constitutional ruling through procedural maneuvering. The international legal implications are equally complex. Under World Trade Organization rules, the United States must justify tariffs through specific legal procedures. Sources at the WTO Secretariat in Geneva confirm that several member countries are considering formal disputes against both Trump's original tariffs and his replacement measures. Brazil, Germany, and South Korea have already begun preliminary consultations about joint WTO action. Mexico's response was swift and pointed. Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard issued a statement at 5:30 p.m. calling Trump's replacement tariffs a violation of USMCA trade agreements and threatening immediate retaliation. Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland announced that Ottawa would respond proportionally if the replacement tariffs remain in effect beyond 48 hours. The USMCA trade relationship that Trump renegotiated during his first term now faces complete breakdown. Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent found himself defending an economically indefensible position. In a hastily arranged press briefing at 6:15 p.m., Bessent argued that Section 122 authority was completely different from the emergency powers the Supreme Court had just struck down. When pressed by reporters about the economic reasoning for maintaining tariffs that the court had declared unconstitutional, Bessent replied, "The president has multiple tools to protect American workers." Translation: the administration has no coherent legal strategy. Drop a comment right now. Tell me if you think Trump will accept this constitutional check on his power, or if he will escalate this into a full constitutional crisis. I am reading every response because the next 72 hours will determine whether we have three co-equal branches of government or whether Trump believes he answers to no one. Here is what we are watching for over the next 7 days. Indicator 1. Does the Court of International Trade establish an expedited refund process, or does it become bogged down in procedural disputes? If the CIT moves quickly, refunds could begin flowing within months. If it stalls, American businesses remain trapped in an expensive waiting game while their cash flow suffers. Indicator 2. Does Congress challenge Trump's replacement tariffs, or does Republican leadership give him cover? If House Republicans introduce legislation to extend Section 122 authority, Trump gets his trade war through legal channels. If they refuse, his replacement tariffs expire in August and his entire agenda collapses. Indicator 3. Do more Republican senators side with the Supreme Court, or do they close ranks behind Trump? If senators like Todd Young, Lisa Murkowski, and Bill Cassidy defend the constitutional principle, Trump faces a genuine rebellion within his own party. If they stay silent, Trump retains enough political capital to fight the courts. Indicator 4. Do America's trading partners retaliate against Trump's replacement tariffs, or do they wait to see if the tariffs survive legal challenge? If Canada and Mexico impose counter tariffs immediately, NAFTA trade relationships deteriorate further. If they hold back, diplomatic channels remain open for de-escalation. Indicator 5. Do major importing companies coordinate their refund claims through a single legal strategy, or do they file individually? If Walmart, Amazon, Target, and other giants unite behind one law firm, they create a formidable legal machine that could overwhelm government resistance. If they fragment, the refund process becomes chaotic and unpredictable. Indicator 6. Do financial markets treat this as a resolution of trade uncertainty, or as the beginning of deeper constitutional conflict? If stocks continue rising and bond yields stabilize, investors believe Trump will accept legal constraints on his trade policy. If volatility returns, markets are pricing an escalated conflict between the executive and judicial branches. Indicator 7. Does Trump attack Chief Justice Roberts directly, or does he limit his criticism to his own appointees? If Trump goes after Roberts personally, he risks alienating the conservative legal establishment that has generally supported him. If he focuses on Gorsuch and Barrett, he maintains plausible deniability while punishing disloyalty. The indicators are not merely academic exercises. They represent pressure points where American constitutional democracy could fracture completely. If Trump chooses maximum defiance across multiple indicators simultaneously, the United States faces a constitutional crisis unprecedented since the Civil War. If he chooses strategic compliance on most indicators while maintaining face-saving resistance on others, the crisis remains manageable within existing institutions. Financial markets are already pricing in various scenarios. Bond traders are betting that Trump will ultimately comply with the refund orders, as reflected in stable Treasury yields despite the massive fiscal implications. Currency markets show more volatility, with the dollar strengthening against some currencies but weakening against others as traders hedge against trade war escalation. Equity markets are pricing in reduced trade uncertainty, but volatility indices remain elevated as investors await Trump's next moves. International allies are conducting their own indicator analysis. Sources at NATO headquarters confirm that alliance members are monitoring whether Trump's constitutional crisis affects his commitment to Article 5 collective defense obligations. If Trump demonstrates willingness to defy his own Supreme Court, allies question whether he would honor international treaty commitments. This creates a dangerous feedback loop where domestic constitutional breakdown undermines international credibility. Here are the three scenarios. Scenario 1, constitutional compliance. Trump accepts the Supreme Court's authority, works with Congress to extend his replacement tariffs through proper legislative channels, and negotiates a structured refund process that spreads payments over multiple years. Republican senators support a constitutional resolution, trading partners reduce tensions, and the rule of law prevails. This is the stabilization scenario. Scenario 2, escalating defiance. Trump refuses to facilitate refund payments, attacks the Supreme Court's legitimacy, and encourages congressional Republicans to defund court operations. He uses every available executive power to maintain trade restrictions while fighting a prolonged legal and political war against the judicial branch. Republican senators fracture between constitutional principles and party loyalty. This is the constitutional crisis scenario. Scenario 3, economic warfare. Trump abandons all legal pretense, imposes tariffs through military and national security authorities, and declares a trade emergency that bypasses both Congress and the courts. International partners retaliate with comprehensive sanctions against American exports, triggering a global recession. Constitutional governance breaks down as Trump claims wartime executive powers to override judicial decisions. This is the collapse scenario. Subscribe right now. Like this video. Comment with your prediction of which scenario unfolds. I am tracking all three because the next week determines whether American constitutional democracy survives Trump's second term. What I know for certain right now, the Supreme Court has ruled 6-3 that Trump's emergency tariffs exceeded presidential authority. Two of Trump's own appointees joined the majority. $170 billion in refunds may be owed to American importers. Trump has signed replacement tariffs with 150-day expiration dates. Republican senators are choosing between Trump and constitutional principles. International partners are watching America's response. Corporate lawsuits challenging the replacement tariffs have already been filed. The Court of International Trade faces an unprecedented administrative challenge. I know that Chief Justice Roberts authored the majority opinion with surgical precision, dismantling Trump's emergency powers justification in language that legal scholars are calling devastating. I know that Justice Barrett's concurring opinion specifically rejected the argument that policy urgency can substitute for legislative process. I know that Justice Gorsuch wrote separately to emphasize that presidential preferences do not constitute national emergencies. I know that 301,000 American importers have legal standing to seek refunds dating to March 2025. I know that Walmart alone could claim $8 billion, Amazon over $12 billion, and the automotive industry collectively over $8 billion. I know that the federal government collected $134 billion under tariffs that have now been declared unconstitutional. I know that Trump threatened to primary Republican senators who refused to attack the Supreme Court. I know that Senator Cotton directly rebuked Trump's attacks on the justices, while Senator Vance coordinated his response with Trump's communications team. I know that Senate Majority Leader Thune told Trump he could not ask senators to attack the court, and Trump hung up on him. I know that Canada and Mexico have threatened immediate retaliation against Trump's replacement tariffs. I know that the European Union is considering joint WTO action. I know that multiple countries are questioning whether American treaty commitments remain reliable if Trump defies his own Supreme Court. I know that Trump's Section 122 replacement tariffs expire in exactly 150 days unless Congress extends them. I know that the same House Republicans who would need to vote for extension just watched Trump attack the constitutional principle of judicial review. I know that the Coalition for a Prosperous America, the Chamber of Commerce, and major corporations are preparing legal challenges that could reach the Supreme Court within weeks. This is not over. This is a constitutional reckoning between a president who believes he answers to no law and a Supreme Court that includes his own appointees willing to check his power. And we are watching in real time as the guardrails of American democracy either hold or shatter under the pressure of Trump's refusal to accept limits on his authority.